Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This show is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on WBCQ The Planet, of course. Also on IPMNation.org, Saturday afternoons at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's an online 24-hour news program based out of Concord, New Hampshire. And, of course, on YouTube, visit the Camp Constitution YouTube channel, and these shows are usually uploaded as we can. This will be our 81st show since we've been on the air, almost 2 years now on WBCQ. We're very pleased. Also, please, the show was brought to you by Camp Constitution. You could look us up on our website, campconstitution.net, and see some of the great things we have to offer, including the Sam Blumenfeld archive. And last month, we learned that we got over 187,000 views from that wonderful archive of the late Sam Blumenfeld's work. Some unpublished, published for the first time online, and his newsletters, his alphaphonics. You can teach people how to read phonetically by using our website, among other great things. So, anyway, we have a special guest today. His name is John Paul. John, are you out there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I apologize for the little glitch. Sometimes you get right on, but sometimes you have a little difficulty, so I appreciate it. Well, I met John Paul at last week's, what was the name of the Reclaim America conference in Massachusetts, and it was a really nice turnout. Several hundred people, about maybe more than 300 people. It lasted quite a I guess from like 8:30 in the morning to about 8 at night. And there were I got a chance to meet a lot of new people, and reacquaint myself with some folks I haven't seen in a while. We had an information table there, and sadly, somebody walked off with our clipboard with some of our contacts, and we had made pledges to some of the people. We offered a book to them, and hopefully we can find out, probably not that many. Hopefully we can recapture this list and get some of these people we plan to give a book to. But you were very nice enough to give me a book called Cues for Conservatives, How to Engage the Millennial Generation and Unite the Conservative Movement. So first, tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and then about your book.
Well, thanks again. And I wrote my book to, I hate to inflate my view here, but to help save the country, because we need more Americans that understand the importance of the Constitution, our constitutional freedoms and liberties, and what the Founding Fathers had really framed for us as citizens. And I think that the progressive Saul Alinsky type of movement, which I can get into Saul Alinsky in a minute for your listeners that don't know who that man is, but I wrote the book kind of in response to a book by Saul Alinsky called Rules for Radicals, written, I believe, in 1972 by the late hardcore socialist and communist Saul Alinsky. And there's people in the political left that follow him religiously. This book, Rules for Radicals, is almost a religious book.
By the way, including Hillary Clinton, she actually knew him personally and worked with him.
That's correct. And that's detailed in my book. She's a disciple of his, and so is Barack Obama, of course, amongst other hard left socialist liberals today.
No, I don't think Barack didn't know him personally. But he was trained by one of his disciples.
Correct. He did not know him personally, but he had an effort in Alinsky. He stated, I believe he stated that the book Rules for Radicals and Saul Alinsky was one of the best books he's ever read. So that you get an idea for how much of a fan he was of Alinsky. And so that my book, Cues for Conservatives, the name really is inspired by having an answer, a very strong answer back to Rules for Radicals. I really haven't seen anything from conservatives that really went after this Rules for Radicals Bible, I call it. And the subtitle of my book is How to Engage the Millennial Generation and Unite the Conservative Movement. So I both look at the millennial generation, which leans unfortunately heavily liberal today, how the GOP has to kind of change its ways in certain ways while keeping to its roots to attract the millennial and other future younger generations, and how to unite the conservative movement under one strong banner. And that's what I wrote the book about at a high level.
Well, tell us a little about Rules for Radicals. Now, I've read the book, and I knew that a lot of people in the Patriot community read the book, and I think it's sort of laced for, he dedicates the book to Lucifer, even though he claimed to be an atheist. He used a lot of Old Testament terminology in the book as well. And he kept on making reference to the haves and have-nots, or the have-sons that want mores. And I thought it was just pretty silly stuff that people would fall for. I mean, if you're a have-not and then you become a have, then I guess you're the bad guy. So once you get into power, then you are now the bad guy. So it's just philosophically inept, in my opinion. But of course, a lot of people bought into that.
Yes,
I remember hearing something about Hillary Clinton loathing the military, because this is something that people on the left do. But when I think the jets were flying over at some event, it was the inauguration, and someone said something like, "Well, now there are jets, so we don't load the military; it's our military now." You see? Yes,
of course. Yeah, she's about as bad as it gets, which is the reason why we have to make sure we elect Trump in November. But yes, Saul Alinsky was just it was really quite juvenile. I mean, if you read the things he's written, it's really offensive. He only talks about the have-nots overthrowing the haves, and taking their property and political power, but he talks about go after people and not institutions, because people hurt worse and faster. So very very ruthless things he said in his book, and the means justify the ends 100% for Alinsky. He said that multiple times. So the means always justify the ends. The ends always justify the means. So whatever route to get there, lying, corruption, stealing, anything, upheaval,
violence,
race wars,
and,
that's all worth it.
And destroying property, dumping. What was the one chapter we had about this movie theater where people were just leaving excrement everywhere, and with Kodak, I actually knew a man who was an undercover agent for the FBI that knew him. He was very busy in Rochester, New York, as an undercover operative, and he was trying to take down Kodak. And and this is Alinsky saying that Kodak was well respected. I mean, it gave lots of thousands of people a livelihood. So don't go after Kodak, but go after the CEO or the president, whoever. Can't recall the man's name. So you don't take down the institution; you take down the person running it. But meanwhile, when you do that, you're taking down the whole entity.
That's right. So, and the unfortunate thing is, many of his tactics were effective. I mean, they are very very immoral and unethical, but many of them were effective. So, in my book, I talk about his rules, and then I go into my rules of he, of course, dedicating his book to Lucifer, had 13 rules. I had 12, because mine's more dedicated to Jesus Christ than the other side of the coin. And so I believe in taking some of the things that worked for him and use it in a moralistic way, but use some of their own rules against them where appropriate and where we don't go outside our ethical boundaries. And then I had a list of other rules that I think that conservatives ought to use to defend conservatism at the same time. When I say conservatism, I mean America at the same time, of course, while finding ways to go on the offensive. And conservatives are always on the defense, so we're defending. Why don't we go on the offensive once in a while? Because a good defense is often the best defense is often a good offense. So
that's right.
I think we need to be more. We got to take their rule book, and we have to go out and march the streets and things like that when we find our rights trampled on. For some reason, conservatives just keep taking it, whereas liberals will go and over things that they're proven wrong. All the cases where these people of color were African Americans were killed by police. Almost all of the sensationalized cases, they were in the wrong, and yet they don't care about the facts. They care about creating a race war to generate votes for Democrats. So
well, the interesting
why don't
thing,
we go after
this group, Black Lives Matter, probably has a Lewinsky, the people running the show and funding it know exactly what they're doing. Now, I understand last year there were about 110, 112 black men killed by police, and some of these police officers were black while there was a crime or an incident going on. Meanwhile, well over 3,000 black men were killed and murdered by other black men with non-police, and for some reason that's a non-issue. And when you bring this up, you consider if you're white, you're a racist.
That's
in other
right.
words, we don't address the problem, and it doesn't talk about some of the innocents people hit, by stray bullets, or people that are in neighborhoods that are terrorized because there's a gang in that town, that community, and there's very little they can do about it because the cops the cops are afraid to intervene because they're going to be charged with all kinds of problems, be charged with racism or what have you. So these thugs pretty much run the neighborhoods. And tell me, how does that elevate a black life, you see?
Yes, and the point is, Black Lives Matter doesn't care about black lives. It cares about political power. And if you understand Saul Alinsky and these things I touched on in my book as well, it gives you insight as to when you see these things happening. Now you know why people like Obama and Hillary relish in these race wars. Because when you create that division, guess what? It'll the latest poll I think in North Carolina was, I think Trump is getting 3% of the black vote, and Hillary's getting 80 or 90%, and that helps. Unfortunately, those things help because it creates the division. Then it makes you it's identity politics at work, and if you're black, you feel like you have to vote for your people, even though it's all made up. And again, that if you read Saul Alinsky and you understand him, this is something that's by design. They want this to happen. So behind closed doors, the Democrats love these kind of race wars because they want it to happen because it creates division, racial division, and that helps. Yeah. It helps them.
During the Watts riots in the 60s, 65, 66, it was horrible, and this would be one of the black communities in Los Angeles. Herbert, maybe you recognize the last name. I'm pronouncing it wrong. Aptheker, I think his name was. He was a Communist Party theoretician. And he said Watts was glorious. They wanted Watts to go up in flames. So here are these white intellectual communist socialists that really hate black people. Yet they claim to be the friends of the black people, and they're glad when their communities are going up in flames because the bottom line is the solution is always more government control. And when you see that as a solution, you know who's behind it. I mean, if it was a free market endeavor and the results was freedom, then you'd say, well, gee, this is the positive way to handle a situation. It was always more and more government. Now, I grew up.
That's right.
And I live in Boston, and I went through the forced busing in Boston. First off, the term forced busing is bad in itself. But in Boston, the federal judge unconstitutionally said that the schools have to be desegregated. And it wasn't, they called it de facto segregation, not de jure. In other words, you lived in the neighborhood of Boston that was predominantly white. Your school was predominantly white. If you lived in a neighborhood that was predominantly black, the school was predominantly black. But they said, you can't do this because back in 1954, there was a Supreme Court decision based on little black girls playing with white dolls as opposed to playing with black dolls. They thought the white dolls had more value, and we can't have that. So we need to change things, and we need to, and blacks, to me, this would be an insult, being a black, if I were a black man or a black person, and they said the only way you can learn how to properly is you have to have white kids in the schools.
Sure.
Yeah, and of course that's a lie. And most blacks didn't go along with it, but the so-called black leaders, the Sharpens and the Jacksons, in this time, and I saw firsthand how racism was promoted. Now, the government can't force me to throw a rock at a school bus, or beat somebody up in the hallway in the classroom. But it's like
Sure.
I equate it to having a can of gasoline and some matches in a room full of 4-year-olds. We shouldn't be surprised if the room they set the stage to make it happen, and they come back and they say, "Oh, a nice social experiment." You see, and it was interesting too. I remember I could write a book about the subject, but I could see these so-called neo-Nazis coming into Boston, working with groups like the Progressive Labor Party. It's almost as if they met beforehand and say, okay, well, the foundation gave us $50,000 to rent costumes and rent a bus, and they gave you more money for, we don't. And they shook hands and they did their thing. And one group goes off to the whites, the other group goes off to the blacks and the liberals. And in the wake is more violence, more control, hatred, race hatred. White people wouldn't go to Roxbury. Black people wouldn't go to South Boston and Hyde Park and what have you. And at the bottom line, in education, that was not even the issue. Who cares? As long as we have, and a lot of white people who could leave the city left the city, and now you have probably one of the worst public schools in the country. That was the way. That was the result of this one. And so it's never improving anyone's lives. It's always making lives worse.
That's right. That's right.
Now, let me ask you, so let's switch topics and get back to your book here. How does, I'm 57, I'm an old fossil, you see, but how do I, and by the way, I think I relate pretty well to young people. I'm the camp director of Camp Constitution. I think I could have got a handle on young people, and you challenge them, you don't dumb things down, you see, but, and realize that freedom is the way to go. And also with a strong Christian value that we have a wonderful history, our nation, with all its flaws. Historically, it's the greatest nation in the history of mankind. It has afforded the highest living for the most amount of people. And again, choose another country. I think it was the talk show host, the black fellow that rides a motorcycle. I can't think of his name offhand. Denver. He had a book, Choose Another Country. And Walter Williams would say on his radio show, you don't like it? Would you rather go to South Africa or go to Zaire or go to any of these other countries where the life expectancy is 35 years old and the per capita income is about $200? Is that what you want to go? Is that going to be a better place? But how does a person? How do you reach out? How would you reach out to these people? Now, millenniums are what 20s, early 30s.
Basically born, there's some different definitions on it, but it's basically born between 1979 to 1999. Lately, it's been maybe pushed up a little bit into the early 2000s because there really isn't, the next generation hasn't really been defined yet after that. But we're looking at basically, people born between about 1979, 1980 to 1999 or 2000.
Now, what are you in? I mean, you're 40-ish?
Yep, I'm Gen X. I'm Generation X. Yeah.
I'm a late-end baby boomer. I was born in '59, so I think I'm considered late-end baby boomer. So, and by the way, they refer to our parents' generation as the greatest generation. Well, I don't agree with that. As much as I have the admiration and respect for a lot of those people in that generation, they gave us Franklin Roosevelt 4 times.
Yeah.
They gave us the New Deal.
The worst.
They took us up the gold standard. I'm sorry, that's not the greatest generation. The greatest generation, in my opinion, is the generation that gave us the Declaration of Independence in the U.S. Constitution. You can't even come close.
Well, I think they talk about the living generations. That's why they,
right.
But
well,
I agree with you. Yeah.
The living generation, definitely.
So, your question was how to reach out, and that's I go through it. There's a lot of details in my book, but in principle, I step through, my 12 cues, the response to Rules for Radicals, and I don't know if you had a chance to read through my cues, but I had some pretty good ones in there. I think, my cue number 1 is never rename progressives as regressives, liberals as illiberals. I also call I've renamed the slang for the new GOP, the Grand Opportunity Party. We should be about opportunity. I replaced the O in Grand Old Party to Grand Opportunity Party, and I think we should be the party of opportunity, economically, personally, freedom, with religious opportunity. we should really be talking about opportunity. The Democrats are the anti-opportunity party. Everywhere they turn, they're squashing economic opportunity, personal opportunity, national opportunity. So I think there's some pretty fun things in the rules that might attract some, the millennial generation. My third rule, which is probably the most important one, is defend the Constitution and use it against progressives, because for the most part, the Constitution's on our side, so we should leverage it everywhere we can to stop them in the court of law. So there's a few things like that in my book. But when it comes to millennials, 50% are while they lean very heavily Democrat and liberal, they I should say illiberal, but well, they lean Democrat and liberal and regressive. 50% of them are consider themselves independent. So the flip side to the millennial generation is they're not like my generation and your generation. If you're a Yankees fan, you're a Yankees fan for life. If you're Red Sox, you're Red Sox for life. If you're a Democrat, you're a Democrat for life, and Republican for life. That's the kind of the way we were brought up. But the millennial generation, probably because of the digital age, doesn't want to be labeled anything. So they want to be independent, and they can be convinced with facts. If you can go in piecemeal and explain, I had a great conversation with a very far left friend of mine who was just all Hillary all the way, and everybody, all Trump fans were racist. The whole thing that you hear, and racist, and we're this and we're that. So I said, well, tell me about the policies. Let's get to the policies. Stop all this attacking, racism and all this, because it's not true. And you get down to the facts. And he went on, he's a millennial, saying, oh, my God, we're paying for all of your generation's programs and all your spending, and we're never going to have the economic ability to pay for things. I said, you are a Trump voter. You may not know it, but you're a Trump supporter right now. And when you explain these things, when you get down to the facts of it, most of the things that are conservative, for the most part, with the exception of a couple things, are things that millennials would really, really support. So I think you have to explain it to them in bit-sized pieces, and make the argument one case at a time. And they're open to switching because they don't want to be labeled one hardcore one thing or another. They're much more malleable. So that's the first thing. The second, I'm sorry.
I was just going to interject by that the daily newspaper, the big city daily newspaper, was the media source for in my younger day when I was in my 30s and 20s. That's not the case today, and millennials don't read newspapers for the most part. They're reading stuff online, and there's a lot of alternative positions there. So that influence, that Boston Globe, doesn't have the influence it did. And so, and on top of that, they have a general distrust of the establishment. If they can understand what that establishment is, if we can identify it, not as Democrats or Republicans, but this Eastern establishment where you can elements of both parties sort of like have the same, by exposing the neocon movement. So a lot of the people who do not like the Republicans, it's not the what we call the old school Republicans, limited government, lower taxes, get out of my life, don't mess with me. The more libertarian free market aspect of it, they see, George Bush and his endless wars and his and Daddy Bush, no new taxes pledge, and has no new taxes. So I think that can work for us too. As we have to, if you're a Republican, and again, I'm a Republican. This Camp Constitution Radio does not endorse any party, but most of our people that are involved would be probably Republicans, or in some cases third party. They're just so fed up with the Republicans. But the Republican Party, you have a lot of people who promote a leftist view. So while we reach out to the Democrat millennials, we also got to reach out to the Republicans who are supporting the reasons why we're on the outside looking in when it comes to the White House, because they look at the failed policies of Bush. This is defining the conservative, and that's not true. So.
That's right, and I agree with you 100%. And I think that's why my view is I have a marketing background, and I help brands and help companies market their products better, both to millennials and other generations. But in brief, I think people argue a lot. We should start a new party that's purely conservative. And I said, you know what? You're never going to win. You're going to create two conservative parties, and we're always going to lose. So the best thing to do is just kind of, rehab the GOP. So my view is, giving a bold new logo and look to the GOP as the Grand Opportunity Party, and changing a couple of things. I mean, I'm personally for LGBT rights, but at the same time, not having that squash religious liberties. I believe there's a way to thread that needle to give both sides their freedoms without having one over, without telling, gay people they can't have their same rights as straight people, but at the same time, not suing a bakery that doesn't want to bake a damn wedding cake. There is a way to cross that, because I know millennials, that's a no-go.
Yeah. That's a freedom issue.
Millennials, that's a freedom issue. So if you truly believe in true conservatism and freedom, then you'd support gay rights, but also religious rights, and find a way to do both. And that's what I have in the party, because I know that some of my research shows that if you're against LGBT rights, 90% of millennials won't even look at you. So there are some things I think the party needs to address. That's just one of them. But ultimately we have to stick to our constitutional values. And you go back to the Constitution, it's all in there. With the amendments, after the amendments that were needed for slavery and things like that, obviously it needed amendments along the way. But the Constitution is what's kept us, a free and vibrant nation all these years, and it's just the dumbest thing in the world to go and say it's outdated, like liberals love to do. So. Well,
they say it's outdated, but then you ask them about the Communist Manifesto, and they'll smile and say, "Oh yeah," and I'll say, "Well, isn't that outdated? Wasn't that written by a dead Eurocentric male as well?" I mean, come on, let's be consistent. Let's be consistent. And the thing about we're talking about the U.S. Constitution. It only gives the president a handful of powers and a few duties.
That's right.
Congress has most of the power, but the rest of it, they have about 28 or 30 powers. The rest of it is left to the states. So it isn't a question of whose rights. It's a question of, this is the state. Let the state pass the laws. You don't like the laws, either work to change them or move out and find another state. Don't think because I moved into another state, so I'm going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court and strike down everybody's laws so they can accommodate me, you see. And,
that's right, yeah.
And the goal, we use the term civil right, too, and I think it's important to realize a civil right is a man-granted right. If you believe in the U.S. Constitution says, God-given rights. And the purpose is to protect those rights, and not to give special rights to special people or promote a particular worldview over another worldview. So, anyway, well, quickly running out of time. This was a quick half hour. Where could folks get a copy of your book and learn more about you? I'm sure you have a website.
Yes, well, thank you. It's we'd love to get the book out. Not for money, but to get the word out. I'm more concerned about getting the word out. So please buy the book and share it. And there's a lot more in the book that I didn't go over. I even have a whole chapter on how to defeat radical Islam. I'm something of a 15-year expert on Islam as well. I have a whole chapter on that, and I think it's something that hasn't been addressed right by either party. And I think I think I've got the solution in my book. Not an easy solution, but the only one I believe is viable. So there's a lot more into my book, but that we didn't go over today. But if you will go to QuesForConservatives.com, it's all one word, CUES, QuesForConservatives.com, or Google it. You'll find it. You can buy the book, and you could also get a Grand Opportunity Party T-shirt. You can also get it on Amazon.
It's on Amazon as well, too, and it's a paperback book published by Liberty Hill Publishing.
Yep.
And you have a website too?
Yep, that's what it's QuesForConservatives.com.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. All right.
Yep.
So I thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you last week and having you on. And
likewise.
God bless your efforts, and you know where we are. So thank you for coming on the radio show. And folks, thank you for listening. You've been listening to Camp Constitution Radio on WBCQ The Planet. Good night and God bless.
Thank you.